Dear learners, I am Christina Georgy, your academic counselor for the MEG program. Today we will deal with the course code MEG-05, which is titled Literary Criticism and Theory. So as per the request of our learners, I will be recording this session for your effective preparation of the upcoming TEE. Today we will deal with block 6 of MEG-05. Alright. So, Unit 5 mentions Elaine Showalter and her take on feminist criticism. So, Elaine Showalter is an American literary critic. She writes on cultural and social issues, and most importantly, she is a feminist. The fact that she influenced feminist literary criticism in the US academia. That's because she belonged to the US. She was an American literary critic. Okay. So, she also developed the concept and practice of gynocritics or gynocriticism. It is a term describing the study of women as writers. What do you mean by the term gynocriticism? So, gynocriticism is the study of women's writing. It is pioneered by Elaine Showalter in her seminal work titled A Literature of Their Own. A Literature of Their Own. So, if you look at the introductory section, that is section 5.1, there you can see the full title of this particular work. The very first paragraph. A Literature of Their Own. The subtitle is Women Writers from Bronte to Lessing. She has categorized 3 phases of feminism, mainly the feminine, the feminist, and the female. So the feminine phase was a time period where women writers imitated the men. Okay, it was sheer imitation that was going on. The feminist phase came after the feminine phase, and here women advocated their rights and protested. Lately, in the female phase, the focus was on women's text as opposed to the man's text. Okay, female writing came into prominence. Okay. Yes, you can read about more on this aspect from Unit 5 of your textbook. I'll just mention the most important aspects. So, as part of section 5.3, towards the end, you can have a detailed reading on gynocriticism. Okay. Gynocentric writing means women-centered writing. It is mentioned in the text that this essay would be closer to gynocritics, which examines the characteristics of a distinctively women's practice of writing, and would perhaps be called gynocentric or women-centric. So what would be the opposite? If it is male-centric, we call it androcentric. So the data she uses to support her theory of gynocritics is based on 4 models. Which are these 4 models? Organic or biological criticism, linguistic criticism, psychoanalytical feminist criticism, and also women's culture. So this is also mentioned towards the end of that unit. Okay. So biological criticism believes that biological differentiation is fundamental to understanding how women see themselves in relation to society. Biological means. Now comes linguistic, means related to language, words, etc. Linguistic criticism examines the possible differences in the ways women and men use language, explores reasons for their differences. Okay, if you look at the romantic poetry written by the male romantics, you can always see how the damsel in distress is being described, each and every feature of her elaborated into lines and verses. Okay, all such are male dominated writing, and the way the females write would not actually be the same. Now comes the psychoanalytical feminist criticism. Okay, it is a model based on the relationship between gender and the creative process. And now the women's culture, theories of biology, language and psyche inform such a theory of culture by suggesting a range of social contexts. According to Showalter, feminist theories need to articulate the area specific to women and put this at the center of women's writing. So there are certain consequences mentioned, that is a rewriting of cultural and literary history, that is to include women. Next one, a recreation of the canon, that is the entire literature, to add these women-centric ones also. And the last one, an overhauling of literary classification based on era and genre. So those things are mentioned. There are more points and aspects mentioned. Please make sure that you read this when you get time. So this particular work, Feminist Criticism in the Wilderness, is the work in which such aspects are seen. It is written at a time when the American campus was increasingly concerned with women's studies. And this particular essay, Feminist Criticism in the Wilderness, highlights the need for feminist theories to work out a framework they can share, a common framework they can share. And this particular feminist, Showalter, suggests gynocritics, that is the theories which are centered on the experience of women as writers, as a common factor. She mentioned that gynocriticism or gynocritics should be a common factor. Showalter also explores biological, linguistic and psychoanalytical models of difference in women's writing and sets them aside in favor of a theory based on a model of women's culture. That is, even if there are differences based on language or biology or psychoanalytical aspects, if there is a common women's culture, if there is something based on gynocritics and things like that, all such issues can be easily addressed. She reminds the feminist theories of the need to keep the cultural phenomena, it includes class, race, etc., to produce a thick or multi-layered analysis of women's writing. And hence, this will enable the feminist theories to map the wilderness, to have a better understanding of the female writing and feminist theories. So that's all regarding Unit 5. So if you have your course book with you, if you look at Unit 6, it is a very relevant section. Unit 6 is titled Feminist Concerns in India Today. So it speaks about our nation and the feminist concerns that are addressed here. Feminist theories intervene in the process of the world so as to reveal gender biases in the reading, writing and teaching of literature. The recognition that education is integral to the emancipation of women, as we saw in Mary Wollstonecraft, is mandatory or very essential. Anxieties about the need of economic and artistic independence of women are voiced by Virginia Woolf in England. That also we saw. We saw how the idea of otherness was expressed by Simone de Beauvoir. From Showalter, we learned of gynocriticism, gynocritics, etc. So these are the major points that we discussed today in this blog. You can read about Unit 6 that deals with the contemporary issues of feminism in India, rather the feminist concerns in India today. I leave that to you for your own reading and understanding. So I suppose I have explained all the basic concepts with respect to the female writers. To sum up what we have already discussed, we started off with a general introduction, that is the features of feminist criticism. There we discussed what feminism is. We discussed how sex and gender are related in constructing identities. Sex is a biological construct, whereas gender is a social construct. And we discussed the importance of feminism even in the contemporary culture. We discussed stereotyping, we discussed patriarchy, the structure of power and ideology in the society. Thereafter, we moved on to the next unit where we saw Mary Wollstonecraft. We discussed vindication of the right of the woman, where the importance of education was emphasized. Women must be educated. Then thereafter we looked at A Room of One's Own, where Virginia Woolf was very much concentrated on the prerequisites of a woman being a writer, which are a room of one's own and also financial independence. Thereafter, we moved on to the next feminist. Who was she? Who was the next feminist? Simone de Beauvoir. There we discussed the second sex and how one is not born but rather becomes woman, the concept of otherness we discussed. And finally, in Elaine Showalter, the feminist criticism in the wilderness and the major points of discussion with respect to that essay has been pointed out. So these are the essential points that you need to remember from this blog. I took efforts to have a detailed, elaborative discussion on this blog, just because if you study this blog, you can certainly score better, because there will certainly be a question from this blog. If you are lucky, you can get more than one question, because there will be short questions also. Gynocriticism is an important question. Then second sex can be a question, room of one's own. Then a question can be all Wollstonecraft. That could be an essay question. Wollstonecraft and her take on the need of education, women's right, etc. I'll make sure that I'll discuss more on the previous questions from this unit along with other blogs as part of MEG-05 course as such in the upcoming sessions also. Okay, so that's all for today. We'll meet again soon in our next session. Thank you.